the E-Rank Hunter Jin-Woo decided to work as a miner in a high-rank dungeon. In his first day of work, he was greeted by the other miners. The miners inquired if he had any experience in this work, to which Jin-Woo replied that he had never worked as a miner before. The head of miners assured Jin-Woo that he will be fine. The high-rank dungeon are very large, that's why the hunters are divided into two groups. The attack force consists of the stronger hunters who takes care of defeating the monsters, whereas the low-ranking hunters are in mining team who are in charge of mining the valuable ores found in the dungeon. They are also responsible for collecting the corpses of the monsters. Jin-Woo was part of the mining team. The procedure of clearing the dungeon goes as follows. First, the attack force get rid of the normal monsters, leaving the boss for later, as once the boss is defeated the dungeon will be closed and they can't mine any resources, so the boss had to be defeated after the mining is completed. The dungeon Jin-Woo had to mine was an A-rank dungeon. It was the first time for Jin-Woo to enter such a high-ranking dungeon. As an E-rank hunter he was only able to enter E and D rank dungeons so far, but as a miner he could enter even an A-rank dungeon. While he was waiting outside the gate, the attack force was defeating the enemies inside. The S-rank hunter and the leader of Hunters Guild, named Choi Jong-in, was also part of the attack force. He was a very powerful hunter capable of blasting strong fire projectiles. He defeated an entire horde of monsters with just one shot, while the tanks defended him and the party from his fire blast's recoil. Behind Choi Jong-in was the co-leader of Hunters Guild and an S-rank hunter named Cha Hae-in. She was a beautiful blonde lady. Outside the dungeon, the miner team were waiting for the attack force to come back. After some waiting, the attack force finally came out of the dungeon. Sung Jin-Woo was carefully observing the attack force as they came out, but as the co-leader emerged, Sung Jin-Woo detected that she was even stronger than the leader of the Hunters Guild. Cha Hae-in also sensed an unusual presence among the miners, but to not get caught, Sung Jin-Woo immediately hid his presence, thinking that she is mistaken. Cha Hae-in left without paying much attention, so after the attack force left, the mining team approached the dungeon to clear the loots. Upon entering the dungeon, the other miners started gossiping about Jin-Woo. They assumed since Jin-Woo was an E-rank hunter he should not be allowed in such a high-ranking dungeon. They were thinking low of him. Nonetheless, after that, the miners started their work and began collecting the resources. They even transported the dead corpses of the monsters since they were valuable too. As the work was going on, the head of the team asked Jin-Woo if he was surprised to experience an A-rank dungeon, to which Jin-Woo replied that the monsters were bigger than he expected. Jin-Woo inquired, what will happen if the boss comes out? But the leader assured him that something like that has never happened before. Once Jin-Woo started working, everyone was shocked, as he was mining the ores in an unimaginable speed. They couldn't comprehend how an E-rank hunter could be so efficient. They even suspected if he was really an E-rank hunter, but they had already confirmed his license before. Nobody could believe what they were seeing. After a few moments everyone left for lunch, but Jin-Woo stayed behind to finish his work. As he was finally left alone, Jin-Woo took this opportunity and tried to take a look at the boss. As he witnessed the giant boss sleeping, he tried to attack him with his dagger, but as he was about to do that, he was interrupted by Cha Hae-in, who was patrolling the dungeon. Jin-Woo said he was lost in the mines, to which Cha Hae-in replied that it is where the boss resides, and he have to leave. For an instant Cha Hae-in thought that she saw a dagger in his hand, but it was gone now. She wasn't sure if she was hallucinating. When she crossed Jin-Woo, she was surprised by his smell, and tried to smell him again. There was no stench coming from Jin-Woo. She inquired if Jin-Woo was really a hunter and checked his license. She confirmed that he was indeed an E-rank hunter. After clearing her suspicions she let Jin-Woo leave. Cha Hae-in was dazzled by Jin-Woo's sweet fragrance. As Jin-Woo returned, the mine leader told Jin-Woo that he was lucky to get the chance to meet Cha Hae-in, as anyone rarely gets the opportunity to get to her. The miners told him that she is able to smell a certain smell from the hunters, and it's apparently quite foul. That's why she always covers her nose with a handkerchief around hunters. Jin-Woo deducted since he is not an ordinary hunter, rather a player. Probably that's why maybe Cha Hae-in smelled a different fragrance from him. After completing the mining work he was paid by the leader. The leader thanked Jin-Woo as because of him, they were able to finish the work early. He even invited Jin-Woo for mining in the next day, promising that he will be getting paid more because of his talent in mining. The next day they were going to work for the B team. As the Hunters Guild was quite large they were able to handle 2 attack force instead of just 1. Jin-Woo accepted the offer and promised to come to work in the next day. Whereas in the night Cha Hae-in called her sources to find more information about Jin-Woo. She suspected that Jin-Woo might be a spy from another guild, but it turned out her informant already knew Jin-Woo. She was surprised that how her informant knows about him already, to which her informant replied that their leader Choi Jong-in has also contacted him to find information about Jin-Woo. Cha Hae-in was confused. She thought, why even her master wants information about Jin-Woo? It was really rare for so many S-rank hunters trying to gather information about an E-rank hunter. She didn't know why her master wants to know about him. But the main reason why Cha Hae-in was curious about Jin-Woo was because of Jin-Woo's sweet fragrance. She wasn't able to comprehend why Jin-Woo smelled so nice. In the next day, Jin-Woo arrived for work again, and he was warmly greeted by his co-workers. Jin-Woo felt comfortable among them and was enjoying their company, but suddenly a member of the attack force arrived there and requested someone from the miners to volunteer in their team. As their porter didn't show up, everyone from mining team seemed hesitant, because although the work of the porter is simply to carry the equipments, but still there was a lot of risk involved in entering the dungeon with them, everybody was reluctant. But to everyone's surprise, Jin-Woo raised his hands and accepted the offer. Immediately his co-workers tried to stop him, warning him about the dangers. They also informed the attack force member that Jin-Woo was an E-Rank Hunter, but the member had no problem with his rank, and took him inside along with him. The B team comprised of 11 E-Rank Hunters and 6 B-Rank Hunters. The team was indeed very powerful. The team started their march towards the dungeon. The gate energy was weaker than the previous day's dungeon, but still for some reason Jin-Woo felt as if it was stronger than estimated. Nonetheless, they still went inside. Upon entering the dungeon, everybody assured Jin-Woo that they will keep him safe. They even stated that the safety of Porter is the whole team's responsibility. But Jin-Woo was smart enough to understand that the only time a porter will ever get attacked is when the whole team is wiped out. Suddenly the hunters noticed the presence of monsters and prepared for battle. They seemed surprised as the monsters were actually jackals, although they easily got rid of them. But still they were shocked, as jackals are C-rank monsters, and it was not possible for them to survive in an A-rank dungeon. They inspected the jackals for clues. They found out that the jackals has collars around their neck, which meant that someone was keeping them alive on purpose, and used them as hunting dogs. The dungeon had monsters smart enough to tame those jackals. That was really a bad news for the hunters. Just after that, the hunters felt an ominous presence coming towards them. Much to their despair, this time the enemies were not some ordinary jackals but rather high orcs, a force that must not be reckoned with. Everyone was terrified after seeing them. The orcs attacked the hunters with their spears, and it was proving very hard for the hunters to block their powerful attacks. The hunters were struggling for their lives against the orcs. Even the mages were unable to do any harm against the enemies, whereas on the other hand the orcs were dealing some serious damages. The hunters were getting destroyed and it was seeming hopeless for them. Even the leader of the attack force was panicking in such a brutal fight. There were at least 22 high orcs and only 17 hunters. Moreover, each high orc was as strong as an A-rank hunter. The attack force were heavily outnumbered by the orcs. There was no chance for their survival. A hunter even lost his arm while fighting the orcs. But luckily the mages were able to rescue him, and a healer restored his arm. As she was doing her job, an orc tried to kill her, but to her rescue Jin-Woo sent his shadow and strangled the orc. No one was able to understand how the orc was defeated as Jin-Woo concealed his powers. Jin-Woo silently gave the hunters his assistance through the shadows, and in a bliss the hunters were starting to win. It was becoming much easier to defeat the high orcs, and they were the ones who were dominating the orcs now. Jin-Woo, using his stealth skill, weakened the monsters as much as he could without getting noticed by the hunters. Jin-Woo never wanted to interfere in their fight, but since the healer was about to die, he was forced to step in. Thanks to Jin-Woo, the hunters were able to defeat the orcs. The ordinary hunters couldn't understand how they won, but the mages were skilled enough to sense the assistance provided by Jin-Woo the whole time. The leader was unaware of these facts, and inquired his party to find out who defeated the monsters with their magic. But to the leader's surprise, it turned out that no one did. Sensing the huge gap between them and the orcs, the leader of the attack force decided to retreat from the dungeon. But as they were on their way out, they noticed that the exit was blocked by a powerful barrier. It was a high-level spell. The mages from the attack force tried to undo the barrier, but as they were trying to unlock the barrier, the dungeon boss attacked the mages with his curse magic. The mages started bleeding from the attack. The attack force noticed that over 50 high orcs had surrounded them. They barely managed to survive against the 22 orcs, but now they were against 50 high orcs. The situation was not looking good for them. Then suddenly something surprising happened. The orcs talked to the hunters. It was actually the boss of the dungeon, Kargalgan, who was actually talking through the orcs. The sorcerer offered the hunters to either die against the orcs or follow him. Since they had no chance of winning, the leader of the attack force decided to follow him for now. The leader followed his orders because he was planning to kill the boss as soon as he gets near him. So with this plan in mind, he followed the orcs to their boss. The leader of the hunters asked Jin-Woo to run for his life as soon as they attacked the boss, as they weren't certain whether they could kill him or not. But after their attack, it was positive that the sorcerer would not be able to maintain the blocking barrier. So he ordered Jin-Woo to run and inform the other attack force about the status of the dungeon. But Jin-Woo showed his concern as by the time the next attack force arrives they will be wiped out. But the leader was ready to make the sacrifice. With this serious talk, they arrived at the sorcerer's lair. Outside the dungeon, Cha-Hayan was looking for Jin-Woo among the miners, but the miners informed her that Jin-Woo has entered in the dungeon as a porter. Concerned about the situation, Cha-Hayan decided to enter the dungeon as well. While inside the dungeon, the fearsome sorcerer finally made his appearance. He was a giant sorcerer sitting in a throne while being guarded by 4 orcs. The hunters, on the other hand, were just preparing to attack, but before they could do it, the boss unleashed his unimaginably powerful aura. It made the hunters to fall onto their knees. The hunters were trembling in fear after witnessing his powers. The hunters questioned the sorcerer why he brought them here, as even the orcs were enough to annihilate them. But the sorcerer replied it was just for entertainment. The boss sensed an unusual presence from Jin-Woo. The leader tried to attack the boss, but everyone from his party were so terrified that they couldn't even move. The boss easily blocked his attack, and then used his gravitational magic to toss the hunter up and down. The leader of the attack force was receiving serious injuries from the attack, and if it continued for any longer his death was inevitable. The party members were hopelessly crying for their leader. Jin-Woo was now enraged. He asked the party leader for permission to get rid of the monsters. As Jin-Woo was doing that, an orc tried to attack him, but in an instant Jin-Woo defeated the orc. Jin-Woo asked for permission again from the leader. The wounded leader finally accepted his proposal and asked him for help, and with this the real fun began. The sorcerer mocked Jin-Woo for his arrogance, and inquired that how long he think a single person can survive against all of them. But Jin-Woo was confident because he knew it was a terrible matchup, not for him but rather for the boss. Jin-Woo then proceeded to summon his shadow army, as the battle frenzy was about to start. Meanwhile, outside the dungeon, the inspectors from the monitoring division came to find Jin-Woo. Upon learning that Jin-Woo was inside the dungeon, the officers also entered the dungeon. Even the officers were shocked. Once they felt atrocious energy coming from the dungeon, they had to recheck the rank of the dungeon, and upon revaluation they found out the previous measurements were wrong, as the dungeon was actually the highest A-rank dungeon. Whereas on the other hand, inside the dungeon Jin-Woo was finally unleashing his true powers. Everyone from the attack force were stunned, as they couldn't grasp how an E-rank hunter was able to summon an army. Even the best mages were able to summon only 2 creatures, but there was Jin-Woo standing in front of the hunters with 100 of summons. The orcs tried to finish the shadow army, but the shadows were much powerful than them, and they were easily overpowering the high orcs. Jin-Woo on the other hand was also easily destroying multiple orcs just with his blades. The hunters were really astonished. It was an inconceivable spectacle. As Jin-Woo was getting an upper hand, the boss decided to step in and destroyed a large number of shadows with his fire blast. Finding him as a threat, Jin-Woo attacked the sorcerer, but he was easily able to block Jin-Woo's attack with his magic shield. Then the boss unleashed another powerful blast, getting rid of even more shadows. With his shadows being wiped out, Jin-Woo was in a disadvantage. Moreover, he didn't have the sufficient mana to summon them again. But he was not just some ordinary hunter. He took out a potion from his inventory and replenished his mana in an instant. With this he summoned not only his shadows alone but also called out for the shadows of the dead orcs. Even the sorcerer was shocked when he saw his army getting turned into shadows. Jin-Woo even threatened the boss that he is going to turn him into a shadow too. The boss was dumbfounded. The strongest shadows of Jin-Woo were now fighting against the 4 generals of the sorcerer. From the fight it was clear that the shadows were more powerful than the orc generals. Bursting with anger, the boss applied all his curse spells and prepared to attack Jin-Woo. But little did the sorcerer knew, Jin-Woo had resistance against all curse spells and his attacks were rendered useless. The sorcerer couldn't grasp how Jin-Woo was unaffected by his spells. On the other hand, Jin-Woo's shadow mage, who was equipped with Orb of the Avarice and special item which doubles the magic damage, attacked the sorcerer with a large fire blast. The sorcerer tried to protect himself, but the fire projectile broke right through his defense. The boss sustained some serious damage from the attack. Soon Cha-Haen also arrived at the scene. She was baffled seeing Jin-Woo and his shadows. The boss on the other side was now even more furious than before. He applied every spell from his arsenal to defeat Jin-Woo. He grew much larger than before and prepared to kill Jin-Woo, but Jin-Woo was unfazed by it. The boss charged a large energy ball to strike Jin-Woo, but as he launched the attack, Jin-Woo easily dodged the strike and stabbed the sorcerer's eye. Even the officers arrived at the scene, and same as Cha-Haen, they was surprised seeing the army of shadows. Cha-Haen cleared the doubts of officers and told them that the shadows were summoned by Jin-Woo. Hunter Sung Jin-Woo was dealing heavy damages to the sorcerer, and everyone were watching the final moments of the fight. Much to Cha-Haen's surprise, it turned out even the officers were interested in Sung Jin-Woo. She was now truly surprised, as she couldn't understand why everyone was so obsessed with an E-rank hunter. Sung Jin-Woo brought down the sorcerer to the ground and surrounded him with his shadow army. It was over for the boss. The shadows dealt the finishing blows and ended the sorcerer. As promised, Jin-Woo then commenced to call out for the sorcerer's shadow. The hunters and everybody else had already seen too many unexpected things because of Jin-Woo. But when the sorcerer was turned into a shadow by Jin-Woo, they were not able to believe their eyes once again. Jin-Woo was able to clear an A-rank dungeon all by himself. Not only that, he also turned the monsters into ally. It was truly amazing. When Jin-Woo saw the officers standing behind him, he was dumbfounded. He was trying to hide his powers, but now everybody had seen his true potential. The hunters thanked Sung Jin-Woo for saving their lives. As for Cha-Haen, it seemed as she has fallen in love with Jin-Woo. So this was all for today's video. Subscribe the channel for more videos like this.